are the person people call, not always first, but always eventually. When something goes wrong, when someone doesn't know what to do, when the situation requires someone steady enough to carry it, you answer. You've always answered. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You didn't ask to be this person. You've never made a speech about it. It just happened quietly, over years. People started trusting you, and you let them, and then you became it. The reliable one, the stable one, the person who has their life together enough to help with yours. And on most days, it feels fine, even good. There's something real about being needed, something that looks like purpose. But there's a quality to this kind of life that doesn't get talked about. A specific weight. Not the burden of other people's problems. You've learned to carry that. Something else. Something more interior. The dark side of being the person everyone trusts isn't what they take from you. It's what you stop being, slowly, without noticing. Jung wrote about this in terms that are precise and a little uncomfortable to read in Volume 7 of his collected works, in the essay that addresses the relationship between the self and the social world. He describes how a person constructs what he calls the persona, the mask, the social face, the version of yourself that functions in relation to others. This, he observed, is not pathological. Everyone builds one. The persona is how you navigate the world. It absorbs what the world needs from you and presents it back reliably. The problem is when it becomes the whole thing. He wrote, and I keep coming back to this passage, the construction of a collectively suitable persona means a formidable concession to the external world, a genuine self-sacrifice which drives the ego straight into identification with the persona. A genuine self-sacrifice. That's not a metaphor. Jung meant it clinically, to build a persona strong enough that everyone around you can depend on it, to become the reliable one, the steady one, the person others orient around, requires giving something up. The parts of you that don't fit the role, the needs that seem like weaknesses, the questions about what you actually want, the hunger for something that has nothing to do with what anyone needs from you. And this sacrifice happens so gradually, in such small installments over so many years, that most people never identify the moment it was made. His specific example is worth sitting with. The danger, he wrote, is that people become identical with their personas. The professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. He meant this structurally. At some point, the role stops being something you perform and becomes something you are. And when that happens, a specific kind of confusion sets in. You stop knowing which needs are yours and which ones belong to the persona, which feelings are genuine responses to your actual life, and which are professional reactions the role requires. When you're exhausted, is that real exhaustion, or the persona running low on the energy it needs to keep performing? And the self that got set aside, Jung was clear, doesn't disappear. It waits, and it communicates through the only channels available to something that's been refused direct expression. A man cannot get rid of himself in favor of an artificial personality without punishment, he wrote. Even the attempt to do so brings on, in the long run, unconscious reactions in the form of bad moods, affects, phobias, compulsive ideas. The reliable person's private life tells a different story than their public face. The social strong man, he wrote, is in his private life often a mere child. Where the moods live, the irritability, the fatigue that arrives without accounting for itself, the sense of having given everything and still not being quite seen. I want to tell you about a colleague I worked with during my last few years in hospice care. She was the person everyone trusted, not in a title sense, in a gravitational sense. When a family was falling apart, someone would call her. When a patient got difficult, the senior staff would quietly defer to her judgment. When I didn't know what to do with something I was carrying, I'd walk down the hall and knock on her door. She never turned anyone away. She was, by every external measure, exactly the person you'd want in a place like that. But over time, and it took me years to notice. I started to see something she didn't seem to see in herself. She never asked for anything. Not in a noble way. In a way that felt more like she'd stopped having things to ask for. Her office was always open. I don't think I saw her leave on time once. And one evening, after a death that had been particularly hard on the floor, I asked how she was doing. Not professionally, actually. There was a pause, longer than I expected. And she said, "I'm not sure I know anymore." I've thought about that sentence a lot since. Jung would have recognized it immediately. Not as burnout exactly, as the specific disorientation that arrives when you've inhabited a role so completely that the question "how are you" stops having an obvious answer. The persona would respond, fine, capable, present. But the person inside the persona, the one with an actual interior life, had been placed on hold so gradually she'd almost lost the thread. Jung lived this before he theorized it. Most people encounter him as the senior figure, the founder, the man with the system. But there was a period, roughly from 1906 to 1913, when he was someone else's reliable man. Freud designated him his crown prince, the brilliant young disciple who would carry the movement forward, take it international, validate it scientifically. Jung accepted. He traveled, he lectured, he absorbed Freud's intellectual framework and built the persona the role required. But during those years, his own thinking was developing in directions Freud's model couldn't accommodate. He saw things in the unconscious that didn't fit. He had a different intuition about the nature of the psyche. And for years, he held those ideas privately, because to speak them would be to fail the role. When he finally published his diverging work in 1912, he said afterward that he knew it would cost him the friendship. It did. The persona collapsed. And what followed, the years Jung documented in the Red Book, was one of the most disorienting periods of his life. The self that had been set aside to maintain the role of crown prince came back with force. He wrote that the collapse of the conscious attitude, the moment the persona fails, always feels like the end of the world. The most influential psychologist of the 20th century, sitting alone in his study, confronting everything that a decade of being the reliable one had required him to bury. Not as punishment, as return. Here's what I want to offer, Dirt, not as an instruction, but as something to sit with. Being the person everyone trusts is not a problem to be solved. The capacity to be that person, steady, present, genuinely dependable, is real. It matters to the people you carry. But Jung's observation cuts quietly at something underneath. When the persona becomes complete, when there is no part of you that exists outside the role of reliable, the question you stop getting asked, and stop asking yourself, is a simple one. What do I actually need? Not what do I need to do this better? Not what would make me more effective. What do I need, full stop, as a person who exists outside of being useful to anyone? The dark side isn't the weight you carry for others. It's the private life of someone who learned somewhere along the way to stop having needs of their own. The moods that arrive without explanation. The fatigue that doesn't match the week you've had. The faint sense, in the quiet moments, that you've become so dependable to everyone else that you've become almost theoretical to yourself. Jung wrote that the dissolution of the persona is necessary for individuation, not its destruction, not an ending, but the recognition, clear-eyed without drama, that the role is something you wear, not something you are. The person everyone trusts doesn't need to stop being that person, but at some point, they may need to ask the question they're best at helping everyone else avoid. What would you do if no one needed you to be this for a while, and whether you've ever let yourself find out?